Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today we have a hot location of Elysium. Elysium is going to reduce the cost of your cards by 1, and with a hot location, it will appear in 60% of your games, so it is going to be appearing quite often. So maybe you just stack in a few additional high cost cards. You can increase your overall curve by just a little bit, so you can make use of that card reduction. You can do it in an extremely high roll style where you're really operating on the fact that your cards are going to be reduced in power. You can do a Sandman to offset the amount of cards that the opponent can drop. There's a lot of different kind of paths that you can go with, but for us, as you can tell, we are going with an Omega Red deck. I have so much fun with Omega Red, and the amount of power that it can potentially push is insane. Any deck list that can stack a lane to 3,000 power without the help of a location is absolutely nuts. And so with Elysium, that is actually going to help us kind of hold some of those resources until later in the game so that we can sneak them out. The opponent has less of a chance to kind of interact or respond. And then to amplify this effect, we're going to drop Sarah as well. This list is going to run Sarah. Sarah will reduce the cost of our cards by 1, which we'll add with the Elysium lane. Our Ant-Man will be 0 cost, but something like our Psylocke won't be reduced by 2, but everything else gets the double reduction. And so Wave is going to be 1 cost, Captain America 1 cost, Omega Red 2. So we can do a lot of power push on the final turn to kind of surprise the opponent with our Omega Red, with an Iron Man, with a Claw. There's a lot of kind of sneaky plays that you can do with that much card reduction. And before I jump into the deck explanation, this build is from another content creator named Tolkien. I will leave a link to his YouTube video covering the build as well as his detailed write-up. He ran this before Elysium was featured, and in my opinion, it is so much better now that these cards are cheaper. And so if you want to check out the guide or his YouTube video, it will be in the description below. And so let's go ahead and run through the deck list really quickly. First up, we have Ant-Man. He's going to be a really good card to be kind of a filler. He is a cheap card. Sometimes you won't want to drop him early onto the board so that you can kind of figure out where you're going to be placing your power. But if you draw into Elysium, he's going to be free, so you don't have to really stress about having him in hand. If this ends up in an Onslaught lane, that's a +6 power to the Ant-Man. If it's an Onslaught with a Mystique that copied Onslaught, that is something like a 25 power Ant-Man, which is huge. For a 0 cost free card that's kind of a floater, to be able to push that much power on him is absolutely insane. So next up we have Psylocke. Psylocke has the Honorville ability, next turn you get +1 power. This is going to help us curve into our cards a little bit easier. We can drop an early Onslaught, an early Sarah, and maybe an early Omega Red or something else, but most likely we're going to want to drop one of our 5 cost cards early, especially if it's in combination with Elysium. We could drop Sarah as early as turn 3, which is absolutely nuts. And then we have Mystique. She's going to be able to copy one of the ongoing abilities, and with this deck list, she has no shortage of ongoing abilities as copy. The primary one is going to be Onslaught, but if we need an additional power push, we can copy Claw or Mr. Fantastic. If we need a power push in the same lane, we can do Iron Man, Blue Marvel, Omega Red. There's a lot of options for Mystique in this list. And then we have Mr. Fantastic. He's going to have the ability to push 2 power to the other 2 lanes or the adjacent locations. If Onslaught is stacked on top of him, it will duplicate that. If Onslaught and Mystique is stacked, it will end up pushing, I believe, 16 power to the left and right, an absolute insane amount of power for not having any cards in the locations. And then we have Captain America. He's going to be a decent card to kind of fill our lanes in. And with the Sarah and Elysium, he's going to be really cheap. So a lot of times we can use these late game and push a lot of power and kind of surprise the opponent with what we can push and where. And then we have Wave. If we don't get our Sarah, if we don't get Elysium, Wave is going to be able to let us either cheat out Sarah or cheat out Onslaught a little bit earlier so that we can start really curving into and planning out or carving out our high power in-game strategy. Next up we have Omega Red. He's going to be the extreme high roll. If we don't think the opponent has a counter to our ongoing abilities, we will stack something like an Omega Red, an Onslaught, a Mystique that copied Onslaught, and then an Iron Man or really any other card at that point, an Ant-Man, a Blue Marvel, or Captain America all do a really good job of making sure we win that lane very, very heavily so that Omega Red can push that power into those other lanes. And it's something like 40 power that he pushes into all of the other lanes if we hit the double Onslaught combo. And then we have Iron Man. He's going to be good at helping make sure that we win whatever lane he's played in. Unless they have a counter to our ongoing ability, it's going to be really hard to counter how much power he can push onto the board, along with our other cards. And then we have Blue Marvel. He's going to be able to add +1 power to all of our other cards. In my opinion, he's kind of the weaker of the cards in this list, but he's decent nonetheless. He can help us really swing a lane. Maybe he gives us that little bit of extra power push in a location. If we hit this with an Onslaught or this with a Mystique and an Onslaught, we can start pushing quite a bit of power. It's just not quite as much as like a Mr. Fantastic or a Claw can push with that same kind of combo, and then especially not as much as an Omega Red. And then we have Claw. Claw is going to give +6 power to the location to the right. This is a large amount of power, and then if we hit this with an Onslaught, or maybe we copy this ability with a Mystique, all of a sudden we're pushing 12 power into another lane that we're not playing cards in. So if it is locked down like a Sanctum Sanctorum, a Storm location, maybe even like the Vault, Kiln, any location that locks down and is hard to play cards into, Claw is going to be that card that can help us maneuver that power level. And then we have Sarah. Sarah is kind of like an added insult to injury with this hot location, because once we play her, she reduces our cards by 1. Elysium is going to reduce them by 1 as well. So you can start doing some really crazy plays with how much reduction she can offer. If for some reason you do an Onslaught in that lane as well, you can reduce all of your cards cost by 3. You can even, if you want to do an extremely high roll, you could do a Sarah, a Mystique, and an Onslaught. It doesn't matter which order you do them in. And you can reduce all of your cards by 4. Elysium would reduce it by 1 as well. You could actually reduce all of your cards by 5, and on the last turn play 6 cost cards. Super high roll, very hard to draw into those particular play line or that particular order, but the power potential is insane. And then finally we have Onslaught. Onslaught is going to help us enable pretty much every combo in this list. Wherever Onslaught gets dropped, that lane is incredibly formidable. It is going to be hard to beat that location without a counter or a hard counter to Onslaught. Even a Rogue still feels like a gamble, because if it hits one of the lower priority cards, one of the lower priority ongoing abilities, then all of a sudden you still have Onslaught. You still don't have that power that you want or need to swing this location. And so that is the rundown of the deck list. I am going to go ahead and jump into a few games, but as a disclaimer, before we jump into any games, this deck list is absolutely hard countered by Enchantress. Just about any other card it can manage and work around. Enchantress is a really hard counter to this list. If you know that they're running an Enchantress, you have to spread your ongoing abilities out across the board, so it makes it hard for them to decide which one to target. And even then, it's still a really hard game, because then you can't stack any of your really big ones. Or if you do something like an Iron Man, sometimes they can swing that and pull it back into their favor by dropping the Enchantress. It's really hard to anticipate all of the kind of intricacies that entails. If you know that they have an Enchantress and you haven't gotten too far, most likely it's going to be advantageous to retreat, but there are ways that you can win it. It's just a lot less often. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into a few games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so first up we have Jada P. And this list from my testing has been so much fun, especially with the Elysium location. You can hold Omega Red for just a little bit longer than you normally would have, so you can sneak him out onto the board. It gives him a lot less time to react. You get a lot more time to capitalize on that interaction. So let's go ahead and play our Mr. Fantastic onto the board. The Sandman is actually not a bad play. I thought about running a Sandman in whatever list I was planning on building with Elysium. That way my opponent gets greedy, they're trying to run a really high power list, I kind of counter it at that point. And so I'm really curious what they're going to be running. I'm curious if it's going to be like, my idea was I would be doing a wide deck. So if I ran Sandman, I want some way to impact multiple lanes at the same time. So I would do something where I could go wide, where I could play like a Dr. Doom, a Wong, maybe an Odin. Those sorts of plays is what I had worked up in my head. So we'll see if it looks like they're going around along with that kind of same. Okay, Storm kind of goes in line with a wide deck, and so we actually have a Claw to be able to push power over there. Ooh. This looks like a win. Unless they have a way to counter Elysium, this looks like an absolute win. So yes, we have Claw, we can push it over. We could always do like an Onslaught to push additional power over. But we have Omega Red on the board. We have Iron Man. On 5, we can actually drop Onslaught. On 6, we can drop Mystique. If they have Enchantress, they can obviously win. If they have a Rogue, they could potentially win. But it looks pretty good so far. They drop a Claw, so they do push more power over there, which is fine. Because we are about to duplicate the amount of power that we push over there. Then we're going to duplicate it again. That way it's something like 60 power that we push in that lane. Just absolutely phenomenal, ridiculous amounts of power that we have. Okay, and so in Wakanda, they drop a Dr. Doom. So I was on the right track of, if it is a Sandman, something like a wide deck is what you're going to want to go with. And so let's go ahead and do our second onslaught. That is going to make our Omega Red absolutely massive. And it looks like they are going with probably like an Odin or an onslaught of their own. Yeah, an Odin. Oh my gosh. We need the Uwadu. We need to use the Uwadu avatar. Like the calls and the anticipation have been on point the last couple of videos. So Nick Fury, I feel strongly about your avatar. I really enjoy having your avatar. But it's going to be short-lived. I think Uwadu is going to fit us just a little bit better. So now we are the Watcher. We see all, we know all, we counter all. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one, see if we can kind of keep that high roll going, because this deck list so far has felt phenomenal. All right, so next up we have the Vecna. We do have Onslaught and Mystique, so we're going to be able to potentially get a pretty decent play. I think we play our Ant-Man into the middle location. I don't think he's going to do a lot of good over in Kiln. And he might do us some decent. Ooh, and they kill our Sarah, so we're not going to be able to discount our cards even further. But that might be all right. We may not need to. If we draw into Elysium, it's not an absolute requirement. It just allows us to drop a lot of power onto the board on like the very last turn, so that there's a lot less time to react and counter it. But I think even without it, it's fine. Okay, so they go Yondu and Iceman. Interesting. So I wonder if they're going like a one power or one cost deck, and they're gonna like zoo it out onto the board. Very, very interesting. So I think we're gonna play our Captain America into the Tinker's Workshop. I think we're just gonna kind of let this one set. I mean, we could double it and then double the double, which would end up being, so it's like to the 16th power, right? So would that be 32 power from Mr. Fantastic? 32 to the left and right? I don't know for sure. I don't remember exactly how the math works. I think it is to this like the 16th power, or I think it's a multiplicative of maybe of 8. I don't know. When we get with the double of the double, I start kind of losing track. But I think it's essentially times 16, which would be 32 power, which is going to be incredibly powerful and incredibly strong. Let's go with the Claw in Kiln. That's going to push some power over in Tinker's Workshop. Of course, we're just kind of playing it onto the board. I don't think we're going to need that power. I think we're going to be just fine with an Onslaught and Mystique play, as long as they don't have a way to counter it. And it does look like they're running a Zoo deck. So a low to the ground, like bounce style Zoo deck, which is pretty nice. Ooh. And they gave us the ultimate win condition. They gave us Omega Red. We could try to play Omega Red in Elysium. I don't think we need to. I think we're going to be just fine with the Onslaught into Tinker's Workshop. We can then follow it up with a Mystique on turn 6, and we can do some other play line in Elysium. But I think we're fine in just about all of the lanes. I snapped a little bit late, so it doesn't go through until after this play triggers. But with this deck list, I don't think they're going to be running like an Enchantress or a hard counter. And they only had one card. They didn't have any cards in hand whenever they came into this turn, so I guess we'll see. Oh no! I really wanted to see what the Mr. Fantastic power would be. It's either a 16 power push or a 32. I can't remember exactly which one. But if it was 16, that should be enough for us to have played like an Omega Red, and then just kind of fill it up with little things here and there, or maybe even just a Blue Marvel to push a little bit of extra power into Kiln and these other locations. We should have snapped earlier, knowing that we had such a solid hand. I think we're going to rinse and repeat. We're going to try and snap a little bit more aggressively, because this deck list is incredibly strong right now. All right, and so next up we have Mai. And in our starting hand, we have Sarah and Onslaught. We're going to be able to potentially stack those if we feel like we need to, which will allow us to greatly discount the cost of our cards, and we could add a whole bunch of things onto the board on the very last turn to kind of sneak that power out there. So I'm going to go ahead and play So I'm going to go ahead and play Psylocke into the Central Park location, just in case the last location is something like Onslaught Citadel. At that point, we really want to have that additional space open, especially with the Central Park clogging up some of the board. But the last one does turn out to be Elysium. So how do we want to play this? I think we want something like a Blue Marvel, an Ant-Man, and an Onslaught all into the same lane. So we're going to go ahead and play Sarah this turn. That's going to reduce the cost of our cards even further. We're going to be able to start massing out cards onto the board. They play a Wave, which with Sarah, that's going to reduce them down to a 3 cost, a 2 cost, and next turn we have 4 energy, so we're actually going to be able to play 2 cards next turn. What in the world? Okay, so do we do a Blue Marvel and an Onslaught into the Elysium location? That will allow us a little bit of flexibility. If we draw into our Mystique, we can play that. If not, we can do something like an Iron Man, like an Ant-Man, Mr. Fantastic. We have a lot of solid options at that point. If we draw into Omega Red, that's good too. But they play a Red Skull. And so right now we are winning the Central Park lane. They still have 1 space to play an additional card, so we kind of have to see what they're running. Maybe they have, they might have an Enchantress here. Would they be running an Enchantress? I think we go with just Iron Man and then we hold. We might fill some things in Jotunheim, depending on what they drop this turn. We may do a Claw over in Jotunheim, or we may just kind of really lean into the Elysium location. It just depends on what they drop here. And so they end up playing a Taskmaster, which copies the Red Skull. So kind of unfortunate that we had the Iron Man there. That's going to be really hard for them to come up over. So we can do an Omega Red. That's going to add 8 power to the other 2 lanes. We can, oh my gosh, look at this. Look at this nastiness. With the Elysium, with the Sarah play, we can pump out so much power onto the board. Let's go ahead and lock that in. Since we didn't snap already, I'm not going to snap now. But I think even if they have an Enchantress for one of our lanes, I think we're fine in the others. Oh my gosh. So they have 3 cards that they play here. We do have a Claw, pushes power over. We have Mr. Fantastic, pushes power over. And then we have Ant-Man, which is going to kind of help us push a little bit of power into Jotunheim. So they do have the Enchantress. It hurts a little bit. That does hurt a little bit. We are going to lose the Elysium lane because of that. But we should be able to win the Central Park lane, I believe. Oh yeah, hands down, we win the left and the right lane. They just capitalized and made sure that we didn't win all 3, that we didn't sweep. But because we were able to spread that power out so much, they weren't able to counter all of those ongoing abilities. And so that is 3-0. That is actually, that's about 5-0 because I did test it a little bit before setting up to record. So it's 5-0, 3 for the video. Let's go ahead and jump back into the next one. This is nuts so far. All right, so next up we have Crush. And we do have Psylocke, so we're going to be able to ramp early into Sarah, potentially. Depends on what the last location is. If the last location turns out to be Elysium, we should have played Psylocke this turn. I'm gonna wait, just in case it's not. I know that it's a 60% chance to occur in all games, but I'm gonna wait just in case it doesn't this game. That way we play a little bit on the safer side. We do have the Sarah, the Mystique, and the Onslaught, and so we're gonna be able to make a pretty nasty lane, regardless of if we do it this turn or next. Let's go ahead and snap early. We're about to unleash just absolute chaos onto them. They played a Sentinel. So maybe they're doing something with like hand size where they run like a Devil Dino. I think we're okay. Ooh, the Storm is an interesting one. So with that, we're gonna need to rely on the Onslaught and Mystique with something like Omega Red, and we get a much better card than they do. Ooh, and then we do get Omega Red. So in that case, let's just play Sarah into the flooded location. That reduces the cost of our Onslaught down to 5. We can play that on turn 5. On 6, we can do a Mystique and an Omega Red. And if we draw into Ant-Man, we can do that as well. And I think that might be enough to win us all of the locations. And maybe, if not, maybe the little bit of power that we have here would be enough. We could always do Mr. Fantastic in mid if we draw that as well. And then play, behind that. So they play a Crossbones, which is a pretty good power push. Ooh, and then we get an Iron Man. I don't know of a good way to utilize the Iron Man though, unless the game gets extended, which we don't run magic in this list, because if we had Elysium, we'd have an absolute unit of a lane already, And so let's go ahead and just do the onslaught. Ooh, that Iron Man is a tough one. Maybe not as much. Maybe not as much. That Mr. Fantastic was a beautiful top deck. So if they are going to lean really heavily into Wakanda, I think we're okay. We're going to be able to do the double onslaught. The Mr. Fantastic, we'll be able to figure out if it's 16 or 32 power. And then the Captain America, which will have the quadruple trigger to help us win, or at least stay a little bit competitive in the Wakanda location. So I think we have a pretty good play line here. We don't get the Iron Man or Blue Marvel Omega Red, unfortunately, but I think it's okay. Ooh, are they extending the game with magic? Super interesting. Okay, so it is 16. So it is 16 power that they end up pushing. Ooh, wait, hold on. So they use a Magneto and pull away from... They use a Magneto and pull away from the Iron Man that they put into Wakanda, which is so strange, because that guarantees we at least win that location. And then we had enough of a power push with our Captain America, with our Mystique, which was technically the onslaught, and the Mr. Fantastic, that we came up over their power level. Very, very strange last turn. I would have never called that one. So let's go ahead. I mean, it's still, for the video, it's still 4-0. Let's go ahead and jump back into the next one. We are doing incredibly well. We have gained almost a full, I think a little bit over a full rank already. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one and see if we can keep it going. All right, so next up we have Lordless Warrior. And we do have a lot of our really strong combo pieces already in our hand. We have Omega Red, Mystique, and Onslaught. The Mr. Sinister is not great, but it's not terrible either. We're going to go ahead and play him onto the board. From the Triskelion, that gave us more cards in our hand. We weren't able to draw this turn, which is kind of unfortunate. We really want the Elysium or Sarah in our hand to help kind of propel these. Ooh, and the raft is... The raft is kind of icky as well. I think I'm going to act like we are competing for the raft location here. I anticipate that they cap it out first, but I think I'm going to act like we are competing for it. Let's see what we can draw into. Ooh, so they now know that we have an Omega Red. Interesting. So we can do an Omega Red. We can then do an Iron Man, followed by an Onslaught. That would let us win this lane. It would only push 8 power into these other two, though. So we would need to be kind of cognizant or aware of that. They help us out a little bit. We can actually play our Onslaught onto the board early. Oh my gosh, what are they doing? They handed us the game. They don't have any cards here that they can move out. We have Onslaught. We have Mystique that we're going to be able to play next turn. They just let us push our Onslaught out early. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Lordless Warrior. I don't know that you know the impact of what you have done. I guess if they have like a Gambit, could be pretty bad. But it doesn't look like that is what they went with. They went with a Giganto. So let's have a little bit of fun. Let's go ahead and play our Mystique. We'll play Wave. This is going to trigger... Oh, wait. The Captain America should be enough to let us win this lane by 10, right? I sure hope so. If they skip, and just to make sure we don't win this one by 10, then we win the Triskelion. So I think we should be fine either way. Let's go ahead and lock it in. I think the Onslaught and the Mystique of Onslaught should let us propel our power level from Captain America up enough. Oh, are we only 21? Ooh, we're 39. Okay, so much better. So much better than 21. And then that pushes 32 power in the left. Ooh, they did have a Gambit. Oh no. Okay. My heart. Had that hit our Omega Red, we would have lost. Had it hit our Onslaught or our Mystique, we would have lost. Sometimes it comes down to RNG. Thank you that it targeted the Mr. Sinister instead of one of these. And so you remember back when I said from the Triskelion we get a Mr. Sinister, which is okay, it's not great. I'm glad we had one. I'm so glad we had that body on the board. All right, so next up we have Side Reel. And we have ran into a little bit of bad luck. So we were about 4 or 5 in a row from our recordings. And then we actually hit 2 different users that were running Enchantress. And we matched up to them 4 times in a row. And we matched up to them 4 times in a row. And so it was really, they were really close matches still. But we did end up dropping them, unfortunately. Because at that point, it's just a little bit too much power to overcome, unfortunately. So they have an Adam Warlock, Sunspot, now Armor. I'm curious what they're running. Ooh, Ooh, so they end up capping out the location with a negative ninja, so they don't even have a chance if we do something like Onslaught, and then like Iron Man and Omega Red. They wouldn't have a chance to respond. I'm okay with that. We can start pushing some power so that they don't have the upside of their Adam Warlock. Ooh. The Professor X is pretty unfortunate. Ooh, actually, no, that's fine. We're fine with the Professor X. We can sneak in a last-minute claw into the Elysium lane. Or part of me, it's a super obscure interaction, but part of me is worried about them dropping a Mystique into Elysium to copy the Professor X's ability, which would block us out of these two lanes. And I guess if they did, we could do the Omega Red, we could do the Iron Man, and we'd be fine because Omega Red is going to push 8 power here and here. Yeah, I think it's too obscure. I don't think we even worry about it for now. I mean, it was a super unlikely, very, very unlikely interaction to even ever occur. And so let's go with a play that's a little less intimidating. So if we dropped our Claw, they know that they lost this lane. If we drop our Omega Red, they know that they lost this lane. I think we go with just a Captain America and a Psylocke. We want to come off as, you know, kind of weak, a little bit easy, give them the false sense of security here. So, ooh, they have an Infinite, which is pretty nice. I like the Infinite there. And since we dropped the Psylocke, we're going to be able to do both Claw and Omega Red. So even if maybe they drop an Enchantress for some reason, it wouldn't counteract the Claw because they have initiative. I feel like this is an easy win. We win this one and this one, no matter if they pass or not. So we're going to do Cosmo, which will make sure that the Honorville abilities won't trigger so that we can't do like a Shang-Chi, but that's fine. That's not where we're going. We go with the Claw, which makes us win Grand Central. We go with Omega Red, which makes us win Grand Central by even more. And we don't win Elysium, but we don't need to win all of them. We just need to win 2. That is game 6. Overall, the deck list performs really, really well. If you start running into Enchantresses, you're definitely going to want to pivot away from this list. Otherwise, you can really spread your power and your ongoing abilities, even if they have an Enchantress, and you know they have an Enchantress. If you spread your power and you don't stack it all in one lane, like the Onslaught, Mystique, Iron Man, Omega Red is like the ultimate high roll. But we have enough power play that we don't necessarily need to do that. We can do Captain America in one lane, Claw in another, Omega Red in a third, or Blue Marvel in a third, and fill it in with the other smaller pieces. And then they have to really make a choice of which one is going to be the best value for hitting with an Enchantress. And a lot of times you can sneak away a win even without having it all stacked, or even if they do an Enchantress. But we are going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.